Is it recording now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Are we
started.
live?
We are live. All right, so
time?
we're Thrilling Intent. I'm Fost. This is Jay.
Indeed I am.
This is Jackson, and that's Matt. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Some of you might recognize us. Some of you might not.
Yeah. This is, as he was saying, this is our first Gencon. This is our first panel.
Yeah.
And mercifully, we've been given a kind of a softball here because the topic of rules in general is pretty subjective and depends on the group and the players. Generally, we sort of stick to one core principle, like Fost runs very different games than I do, as you've probably noticed if you've seen the live streams. But we generally stick to the same idea that every single player should be comfortable. They should, you should have a system that makes everyone happy, because really, you're there to play a game, you're there to tell a story.
Yes.
And you're there to have fun.
Exactly.
The rules shouldn't get in the way of that.
And
Well, no,
that
always.
is what today's topic is about. Rules. When to make them and when to break them. We all share the opinion that the first
speaking for
objective...
me?
Yes, I am. Do you have a problem with that?
I mean, his name is on the.
Yes, just a little bit. The topic is... Oh, sorry. We all believe that the main objective from a game should be to have fun. And if the rules get in the way, break those rules immediately. If there are rules you think that could help you have fun, say maybe you don't have enough of a grounding to understand the play, by all means, come up with some rules. Or if you're working within a system, similar to Pathfinder, I think that was our first experience with changing rules. I was...
Fourth edition, actually.
Fourth edition.
Fourth edition,
Okay.
Yeah.
we changed that pretty substantially.
Okay, yeah, because I remember I threw a fit and was like, I don't want to play these classes.
I think you got mad that Assassin was a shadow user. You're like,
it was
I just
so-
want to kill people with knives,
Yeah,
I think
it was so
the argument.
specific.
And
so
just look where you are now.
I like it. So this panel is largely going to be us yammering about rules, what we think of
Yeah.
them, and then the other half is going to be questions. If you have questions about how to approach rules, or if you've had any particular things that you'd like to suss out about any games you're playing.
Yeah, particular systems would be excellent. Like, I have experience with a few of them. Foss has experience with far more of them.
Yeah, that'd actually be a good place to start. Our experience with different rule sets. Originally, I was the vanilla baby. I did not like any rules. I was like, no rules, no. But then I started playing with another group called RPPR, and they introduced me to a very wide variety of rules, and I came to appreciate them to a certain degree. And I found that depending on the game, the rule set will often inform play for the players. For example, more recently we played a game called Eclipse Phase. It was character creation was a bit of a brick wall, but it was a very fun game.
Yeah.
By no means rules light, very rules heavy. However, I also think that due to the way the rules were structured, it helped the players get into the mindset of the scenario, of the system. It was very tactical. It was a very there was like a military science approach. to
Can
all
I
of it.
explain character creation itself and why sort of a more meticulous character creation can work for a game like that? Like,
In a minute. And then some other games I've had experience with on the other end of the spectrum would be an apocalypse world hack called Monster of the Week, which is a fantastic game that is, you pick it up in a snap and run with it. It's very, very narrative driven by the players. The GM and the players sort of share responsibility for driving the story along, and it's incredibly simple. So there's a pretty wide variety of ways you can come at tabletop games, and that's my experience with it. What's your experience?
Thank you. As Foss said, and it's gonna give away a bias. What was that word you used? Vanilla baby? We favor a rules light approach, absolutely, but it doesn't mean I can't appreciate a rule set that definitely adds some mechanical backbone, because mechanical backbone, as he said, does oftentimes inform play. In the game called Eclipse Phase, you're tasked with making a character in a world that's very much transhuman. People have ascended their mortal shells.
Ghost in the Shell in space.
There you go, if you've seen that. But people have moved beyond the simple process of having a body. Your consciousness can be printed onto new bodies. Many people spend a lot of their time as appliances. You can get into some really intense stuff. And the process of character creation there was, on the one hand, you created your character, your mind, and in the second, you chose your morph, your body. It made character creation intense and meticulous, no doubt, but at the same time, it gave you an instant feeling for the setting. Because you could accomplish some really cool things with your morphs, and you could accomplish some really cool things with your mind. And the game was about sort of combining the two of them into one character. And that's a case where I think it really worked.
Yeah.
The setting itself we went into was a little odd. We went through this awesome transhumanist narrative to wind up in what was
Space
it?
Venice?
Space Venice.
With no
Venice.
technology.
With no
whatsoever.
technology allowed, so a little bit of a drop
You
ball in
smuggled
that
in the
case.
technology.
Not against the point, but in this case, I think you can tell how a game itself has hard baked its own lore into the rules. Monster of the Week, on the other hand, sort
It
of
doesn't have any lore baked in, but it gives you an idea of the tone of the game, and it sort of guides you in character creation, helping you to decide or pointing you in the right direction for maintaining a consistent theme. Because whenever you're creating a character in Monster of the Week, it asks you your relation to the other characters. And they generally fit into these tropes like that you'll find on shows like Supernatural or Power Rangers, just very Monster of the Week kind of things.
yeah.
That's my kind of.
But yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
There's actually a shocking overlap between those two shows
Yeah,
now that I put
there
it
is.
together.
And I believe it's all free online. Evil Hat Productions.
Monster of the Week it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jackson, what's your experience with rules?
I am the guy who doesn't read the rules very often because I'd rather just talk and make stuff up as I go.
Oh, you're a vanilla baby.
Yeah.
I'm a vanilla. So I obviously prefer light rules that I can just hit the ground running with. That's where it's nice to have a flexible GM who will allow homebrew stuff. Or just to guide me into the rule set of whatever we're playing. So I think a lot of it is up to the GM to know who they're playing with and support that play style to a
Absolutely.
reasonable degree.
It's all about keeping your players comfortable.
Yeah, well, it's a
Right.
compromise between the two. What's that face? Come on.
Okay, yeah, it's a compromise.
I think most people start out looking what game they'd like to play and saying, oh, let's play this. I'm really interested in it. But I think it's just as important to sort of test out the people you're playing with, because if you're not all on the same page, not everybody's going to have a good time.
Absolutely. Someone who'd be interested in playing more rules-like game would not be down with Eclipse Phase, and you'd have a hard time really getting invested in it because it's a very involved game.
There are steps you can take to compromise, but we'll probably talk
We'll
about
talk
house
about that
ruling
later.
yeah.
I highly suggest getting the people you'd want to play with and just doing some very simple improv or RP. Get a feel for who they are and how they act, who's quiet, who's boisterous, who describes their actions, who just rolls with everything. And that'll start to give you a good idea of how to make everybody happy. Because there are a lot of games and a lot of systems out there, and a lot of people to ask about games and systems.
So how about you, Matt? What's your experience?
For the most part, I've been almost exclusively on the player side of things, along with Jackson.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'd quite describe myself as a vanilla baby, per se.
What about the trend?
I like rules for the most part. At the same time, I don't like them to get in the way of what I'm trying to do with a character. I'd say that I like to push the envelope a little bit. I test you sometimes, Jay.
Infinite imps? What are we talking about here?
Infinite imps, just trying to go as far as I can with a given ability.
Oh, yeah.
Breaking up trans-dimensional mirrors to try and mess with my lasers.
Yes.
So, it is useful, like Jackson said, to have a flexible GM, and there's some interplay between player and GM there. Thankfully, It is a balance. You have to listen to your GM when they say that you can't do something, but pushing that envelope can be important. You don't want to be the guy who's constantly trying to break every single rule. At the same time, at the same time, it's pretty fun.
At some point, you will inevitably get one of those players who pushes it as far as possible, and the GM is going to have to rein them in a bit with rules that don't stifle all the players. So something that I like that you do is, as long as it doesn't impact the game too much and the combat or whatever system you're using, you get to do whatever. So, infinite imps.
Functionally useless creatures.
Functionally useless.
The only reason that I can summon infinite imps is because they're usually for the sake of gags. They don't
Yeah,
actually influence a given situation. It's all for character flavor.
Pure flavor.
I had a conversation with Jay about this pretty early on. You said, like, I can use as many imps as I want for as many things as I can.
I call this the Prestidigitation Rule. Prestidigitation is a spell that can be your best friend, or, like, it creates a lot of fun situations that lets your wizard constantly do things with fun flair. Or it can be your worst nightmare if they find a way to argue that it should be used for anything. The approach that I always have with Prestidigitation in particular is, use it however you want, so long as it seems completely useless to me. You can surprise me however you like, but throw it out, minor magic trick, whatever, so long as...
Don't use it to explode an ogre that you spent an entire session building up.
Well, yeah, I mean, you need to give me a damn good reason for why that should happen, but... Yeah, no, I tend to use this rule a lot. Like, this is one of my own, I guess, house rules. Like, should we get into that now?
Let's get into house rules.
Man, okay. So, I don't know if this is everybody's process. I know it's not yours, but,
I don't even know what you're talking about yet.
well, before every game, I put together a PDF of, like, 10 to 15 pages of just stuff. Like, summarize the game, keep it short, because I know I have players in my group who don't like to read. Keep it short, keep it simple, explain everything as quickly as possible in a concise way for the sake of those players. By the end of it, like, just in the simple process of doing that, like, figuring out who I'm writing for, I've generally thought of a house rule or two that'll help out, like, sort of get the party together in a way that makes sense to me. Whether it's like, more recently, 5th edition, I was playing with a lot of very active players, like people who like talking, people who like jumping in. The first amendment I made was to the initiative order, basically removing it so everybody's playing at the same time, because I thought they could handle it. Like, self-moderating their turns seemed like a more fun step to keep things flowing organically and naturally. It worked out interesting. It devolved into almost instant chaos in a bar fight, and it actually made me ratchet back on that, like, maybe it's there for a reason. Like,
And that's actually something really good to get into. Not every change you make will be a good one. And sometimes it won't always work in the way that you expect.
oh no.
Yeah. So going back on changes isn't like a bad thing. It just means that you're getting a better understanding of the rule set.
Yeah.
And while some of those rules and experiences will be applicable to other games and other groups, most of them are probably going to only work for these specific people in this situation.
You've got to keep your players in mind when you're doing something like this.
That being said, we do play things by the book. Like,
I tried
to a
to.
More or
point.
less,
Yeah.
yeah.
I tried
like,
to.
God, not on a stream in a while, but what was the last thing we played by the book? Was that
Pokemon.
Yeah, well,
Did you
close
play-
to it.
Yeah, we played the Pokemon tabletop.
We played Pokemon Tabletop United, which is a really good fan project.
It's a very
strong.
well-made fan game. It has some complications that we threw out. We demoed them once and then just never did it again because it wasn't fun.
Well, that's neither here nor there. It really depends on, like, if you find that fun, because you can pull off a lot of intricate things with your Pokemon design. I think the last one that you went sort of whole hog on the rules for was Red Markets.
Whole hog as I could. That was my first experience running red markets, and I felt I didn't quite do a good job with it because the whole focus of a game like red markets is to simulate the how do I describe it? The
Zombie apocalypse?
no, actually no. The focus of Red Markets is more about
Namaste.
simulating the economy after the zombie apocalypse. Now, that might not sound interesting, but, but I swear it is. Because it's going to be very, very difficult to survive when you can't just go to the store and buy food.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to agree on a temporary currency. And it's going to be quite difficult to earn money to trade in this. And its whole motif is like scarcity and having to work really hard for your victories.
A lot of despair, like
Yeah.
heavy despair.
Heavy despair. I think one time you made a roll to not cry,
Yeah.
and then failed it.
I failed that roll. And winked openly. Yeah, no. I believe that was one of my 2 rolls in the entire session.
Yes.
I had a good time. Red Markets, once again, communicates a very heavy theme through its mechanics, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, a classic example is the dice. It uses a black dice and a red dice. Talking in terms of economy, you want to be in the black. You don't want to be in the red.
Yeah.
So if the black dice is higher than the red dice, you succeed. So it teaches you through the themes that are consistent through the book.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
Also important.
Also important.
As far as creating Homebrew, we've been playing together for years and years and
Years
years. So
Sorry. I apologize.
Please.
I've been playing since 1980. When guys like you say that,
I only said years
We're
3
youngins.
times. So
6.
we have, we know each other, the types of things we like. We have experience creating homebrew rules that, for the type of people we are. At the same time, when we do that, the temptation is to immediately do that
Yeah.
right
Always,
when we
yeah.
start,
Yeah.
and that's not always the best because
Yeah.
everything will kind of come out the same no matter what game we play if we do that. But for example, Ryutama, which we played recently,
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
yeah,
Really good.
a lot of what we do is make up classes just right off the bat. But this game, the classes really determined what it was we would be doing and how we'd be doing it, and that's something we would have totally missed otherwise. Like there being a farmer and a main mechanic of a class being gathering herbs. I think we would have gone in katanas blazing if we hadn't really paid attention to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a real good point. The temptation is like, oh, I know my group. Like, I know better than
Yeah.
this, that, or the
Right,
other thing. No, very frequently you do not. Or at least I don't.
I think there's a lot to be said for starting out with most, if not all, of the rules
Yeah.
as
Well,
they are.
testing the waters.
Yeah, and slashing and burning or changing after the
Well,
fact when you
yeah.
see what works and what doesn't
Yeah.
for
No,
your specific brew.
frankly, when it comes down to it, I think I'm a moron on this front, and I
Oh,
need
yeah?
to run screaming into things to figure out what works and doesn't. Slamming my face against everything is pretty much the only way I know how to approach this, so it's just my method. Like, once again, know your group, know what makes them comfortable, and like act on that. But also, like, take a chance when you buy a new book. Definitely jump into it.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah,
You get these
give the rules
things.
a chance.
You get these things for a reason because they're cool. They're unbelievably cool. Try to communicate the flavor and figure out what the mechanics are trying to do first. Is always my approach.
Yeah, exactly. And do you guys want to take some questions really quick on anything regarding like getting started with a tabletop game, how best to create rules to fit your group?
Yeah, like if you have questions about systems or just like want to generally shoot the shit about certain ideas or whatever, like I am no authority, but I'd love to bounce ideas back and forth.
Yeah, that's something that we should absolutely keep at the top of. We're not an authority on this. This is
Not
just
at
what
all.
we think.
Yeah, no, totally, completely. Fluff, as I said.
Throw up those hands.
So we're
Have you got
going
'em?
into discussion and question mode now?
Yes.
Briefly.
I would love discussion and question.
And also, repeat the question, one of us, to the mic.
Oh yeah.
Is it-
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah, your question's going to be recorded if that's okay.
Yes.
So Jackson just mentioned like most a lot of the homebrewing you guys do is building character classes. How do you guys approach that? Like, do you just go into the number crunching immediately, or do you do something like what I've seen before is take a character that's what you want to build? Like, if you want to build a magical girl, take Sailor Moon episode 1, use existing rules to try and figure out what she would have there, and then end of the series what her level 20 equivalent would be, and try and tweak it from there, or like how do you approach it?
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah.
Jackson, you're closest to the mic.
So, how do we create our custom homebrew characters? Do we jump right into the number crunching, or do we take some existing trope or inspiration and try and figure out how to do it in the system?
I think it depends.
Yeah, first guy.
I think it's different for everyone.
Homebrewing classes.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it's just like, I want to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's how I
and
approach it.
We figure out an idea first. Like, one of my earliest characters, oh man, this is going way back.
Are you gonna embarrass yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
One of my earliest characters, well, Lafayette was...
Yeah, you are gonna embarrass
Yeah,
yourself.
You know it. He created knives using old memories. And that was my idea. I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think we used some of the existing material. I believe he was an ASMR.
We used very little of the
Very
existing
little. We used
material for that.
okay. We used ideas from it. In that he had an abundance of memories because he reincarnated multiple times. And so he had just a well of memories to draw upon. And that was the beginning of the mechanical founding. We're like, okay, so there's a reason he can just, not immediately run out of memories. And then I think, was this 3.5?
This was 4th edition.
This was 4th edition?
You were Frankenstein.
Yeah,
You were
I
a collection
was.
of feats and abilities from different classes. You were true monstrosity.
Yeah. So we didn't use any outline or anything. We were just like, well, how do we accomplish this? Let's just rip everything from all these different books and all the online resources and see if it's balanced.
So, how would you rate it? Abject failure or great success?
Abject success.
Okay. Yeah, no, it wasn't good.
It was bad.
I was
but-
I was the GM for that, and I had a huge hand in enabling it.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Oh no, this was partially my responsibility, but it was very much a learning experience.
I think that was the first time that we ever that was the biggest change we'd made, at least.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was very much a learning experience of, oh man, maybe we shouldn't play God with all of this.
And again, different people would play that character two entirely different ways.
Yeah.
Some of them would go in, I think you kind of gave it the benefit of the doubt and wanted to play it like a story.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
then there are also players that would argue what counts as a memory so they could have the most ammo
Yeah, exactly.
and get the highest rolls.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think in that same campaign, or an earlier campaign that you ran, the one right before that, I played a sorcerer with a slightly different flavor that we had to bend the rules slightly for. I wanted to punch people with magic.
Yeah, gallon of blood.
Yes. And that was just a slight adjustment to
Yeah.
a few feats.
Like you were a wild mage, and we were just like, yeah, he does it by punching or something.
Yeah. No, that was a slight adjustment to a few feats, and mechanically it still worked.
Yeah.
Basically, it was just melee range spells all the time. But this guy let me do it, which is something that I appreciated
Was it
greatly.
color spray that hit like a truck? It was some dazzling.
Dazzling something.
spray or something?
Yeah.
It was a
Oh,
long
God.
time ago. 66 of damage.
No, yeah, and everyone
right
else
off
was
the bat,
like
disgusting.
1d2, and we're like,
Yep.
no.
No, that was blowing.
66,
That was
that's a
blowing
lot.
people up. But that was pretty much in the base rules, and that's actually something that he let me accomplish. I'd say most of all, when it comes to pre-existing source material, if there was something like Sailor Moon, where it's I want to create something that's sort of a mechanical representation of this idea in a show, that's absolutely the way I'd do it. I'd start out at level 1, what could this character do at the start of the series, and then project a level 20 Sailor Moon blowing up planets with sparkling magic.
Does that happen? Did Sailor Moon blow up? Okay. Thank you.
Not yet.
We can still get there.
She's still level
have time.
14, man. She's got a long way to go.
No. But I take very much the same approach of deciding what I want to be able to accomplish, looking at existing material. Is something funny?
No, oh, he just keeps shoving me off the table.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, please go
Yeah,
on.
I'm not incredibly numbers oriented, so I don't have a very easy
We're
time.
bad at math.
Yeah,
All of
I'm
us.
terrible at it. So I don't have,
Fucking geeks, get a computer.
but I don't have a very easy time building a character from the dice up. So I like to have a trope inspiration or just some general flavor stuff to build off of and figure out the mechanics based off of that. A lot of the time, you're an excellent help with that, and I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
That's
Oh,
part.
thank you.
That's
Can
something
I touch
where-
the table again?
No.
Stop hitting the table.
Yeah.
That's where actually reading the rules and reading the book will come in handy. It'll give you flavor, and then from there you can go all sorts of
I
different
believe
ways.
you're saying that. That's weird.
You can you may get inspired by the way it's written, some art that's in there.
Yeah.
You'll get a feel for the rules themselves, and then you can do something crazy. You can sketch a character that you just feel. You can write a short story. You can any number of things, and that can lead you into your character, and it will have the flavor, most likely, that fits well with the game.
I will say, if you consider yourself a writer in any capacity at all, I find writing stories to be an incredibly helpful way to build a character from the ground up.
Nice.
No,
Good question.
absolutely.
I hope we answered that.
More or less.
In
More hands.
many words.
Who's that? Back. Oh, hi, Piff.
So I believe Jackson actually mentioned like different people have different personalities within a game, like energetic, quiet, that sort of thing. I'm more focused on the quiet. Like, how would you make a campaign or a character or whatever you may be for a person who may be a bit more
Quiet natured.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question was, how would we focus on basically enabling a quiet person in a campaign? Are you like specifically with other loud people, or
Yeah.
we're all
We're
loud?
we are all very loud.
let's just say it's a mixed group.
Okay, it's a
Yeah.
mixed group. But how to encourage and like give proper screen time to quiet characters? I think the first thing that comes to mind, it's less of a rules thing, but at
It's
least
more
what
of an etiquette thing, almost.
yeah, it's more of an etiquette thing.
Soft
It's
rules.
more about the improv aspect of it. Improv is all about supporting each other, and you have to be mindful of the other players. And if, say, you have a character who's more quiet, you'd need to be mindful of whenever they talk, if they don't speak very often, make sure they're heard, or try and involve them in some way, be it like physical comedy that's going on, or if it's not necessarily comedy, then just rope them into a scene. Throw a figurative lasso around them and drag them along. As
Combo
for,
attacks.
Yeah. I unfortunately can't speak from the perspective of the quiet person, but because I'm not very quiet, unfortunately. I'm quite loud. But I guess I could say, watch out for, there will often be stops when people are talking, just like those, whenever they take a breath, jump in right there. Just talk. If you don't speak very often, take every opportunity you can get.
Well, I'd actually like to specify, like, drawing it back to what I said initially, like, it is about keeping everybody comfortable, and frequently a quiet player is just, like, not the most comfortable person at the table, or, like,
Or they're comfortable being quiet.
Or they're comfortable being quiet. Like, there's a lot of different personality types, and you really need to know, like, you don't need to know the person, but you can figure out who the person is pretty quick. From a GM or a house rules perspective, if you have a quiet player and you have a system like Inspiration, which is baked into a lot of games, like rewarding people for good RP or just like getting in, and they're the type of person that likes to be rewarded for like
That's that's actually really
yeah.
good. Could you explain what the inspiration system is for anybody who's not familiar with it?
Inspiration, Ike Chits, if you play
From
Tenra Bancho.
Tenra Bancho Zero.
Yeah, that's a good one. Are basically a system to reward players for good RP or just good play or like doing something good.
Or being funny, or just
Yeah.
anytime you feel they've done something of note,
Yeah.
you throw them basically just a coin that's like
In some systems it's the GM who gives it. In some systems, players can
Yeah.
freely dispense
Yeah.
them amongst the other players.
like
There's
Golden
so
Sky
many ways
Stories,
to do
Tenra
that.
Bancho Zero. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the coin is basically something you can cash to, depending on the system, aid you in a roll, which, if you succeed in that role, it gives you more narrative agency.
Yeah.
So a quiet player can take advantage of that to have an opportunity to interject or
Yeah, like if you have
move
a-
the spotlight over.
Yeah, or if you have a reward-oriented, quiet player, like, yeah, incentives are good. They're a
Yeah.
very good thing.
You can also incentivize the loud players
shutting up.
This is also true.
to include the quieter players.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
make combination attacks more useful. Make
Yeah.
give them some reason to throw the spotlight over to the quieter players.
Exactly.
This,
You're going to do better if you get someone else in on the action.
This is, of course, if the game itself doesn't already have rules that incentivize this, because many games do. Like, it's just there from the beginning. Like, an initiative...
Most games are adopting like inspiration kind of stuff.
Yeah, and an initiative order exists to give everyone a fair turn.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Like, it's so that everybody has a shot and there's a natural order to things. You take that away and there's chaos.
Chaos.
Like, well, chaos can be fun, but
Yes.
that's a different,
different
story. Yeah, that
That
I
help?
hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that's one of our best soft house rules.
Which
is,
one?
is just inspiration type.
Oh yeah, I
things.
love those.
We add it to a lot of
Things that don't
stuff.
have it, yeah.
Not necessarily with points, but just sort of encouraging that behavior.
It feels good to throw Monopoly money at the
It
other
does.
players.
It feels
It's just
really
like there's something deeply pleasing
You
about
both
that.
feel good about it.
Yeah, no, it's excellent.
I saw you raising your hand. Oh, sorry, to your left. We'll get to you next.
Go ahead.
Oh,
You can go first. Lady, go.
I read this comic online called Darths and Droids, which basically it's screen caps of Star Wars, but it's a bunch of guys playing a role-playing game.
Oh, cool.
And in the little captions underneath, sometimes whoever is writing it, they'll talk about different DM stuff. And one time they were talking about if you have problematic players who tend to do like a lot of stuff that maybe you just really don't want them doing as players or as characters, like little secret DM rule punishment systems. Like you get them to roll a D100 or something, and like you get a random table of something that just happens.
Your mouth is so shut now.
Oh, wow.
What's your opinion on stuff like that, like secret GM rules, punishment systems, stuff like that?
My immediate thought is to be overt about it. Highlight, rather than it being like a secret thing. Say they do something dumb. Have there just be consequences.
Let them know that it is dumb. Because
is
if they
dumb,
if they don't realize that, then you're never really gonna.
Are you
get
talking
anywhere
about
with
like
it.
dumb actions in the game, or just behavior outside the game that is?
A little bit of both. Like,
Little bit of
say
both.
you get someone who's playing and they're either they're making another player uncomfortable, or just their actions are just screwing up everything else for all the other characters.
Okay.
The big do not push this button.
Right.
Jackass walking up.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'd say if the rest of the group clearly isn't in line with them, and that player is absolutely being problematic, first off, in the game, have there be consequences solely for that player. They are responsible for their own actions. Outside the game, I haven't really had to deal with that very much, but I'd say that would be more something to settle apart from the table. You'd maybe want to be like, yo, dude, why are you sucking?
Well, wow.
Why are you messing things up for the rest of the party?
Yeah,
Maybe
no.
is a better way to phrase that.
Okay. I want to roll it. I want to roll it back because, like, the whole secret GM punishments thing sounds fun if you have a very antagonistic, like, but positive relationship with a player, where it's like, you know they're gonna mess with you, so you're gonna mess with them right back. Like, that just sometimes happens. You're mutually roasting each other, and that can be really fun. Like, in the case that it's actually like a mutual problem and causing other players problem, I'd say like Foss said, yeah, cute. Remember that everybody at the table, like, you're people first. Like, it can get pretty easily when you read the book and it's like, oh, this is the rules lawyer type of player to, like, sort of typify what they're going through. Just be like, oh, you're doing this thing and it's, like, bothering some people, like, cut it out. Engage. I guess, like, you need to sort of put your finger on why they're doing it, if it's subconscious or if they're doing it to give you a hard time. And if they're doing it just to give you a hard time, is that okay?
Oh yeah, so intentional or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I had a player a long time ago whose favorite trick was to take off into the woods when the party was going in one direction. Just go.
I know who that was.
Yeah,
It wasn't me.
but that was one of my favorite things to punish in very fun and creative ways, and it
They
became...
fall in a ditch full of mud.
Yeah, well, no, it became a running gag with increasing severity over the course of the campaign, because this is something he did, but the campaign was light and jokey, so it wasn't really ruining the tone of it at all. He was fully allowed to go off into the woods and emerge being chased by bears. That was his option. Like,
I think making something silly is kind of a positive way to do this. Well, they might be going as silly as possible, and they can just fall flat on their face.
Embarrass
And
them.
yeah, you don't want to humiliate the person playing the game, but you can sort of do that to the character. Whatever they're trying to accomplish, they're just not going to do it, and it's not going to be as cool as they wanted it to be.
that was a good question. That's a fun question.
Did that help? Did that answer? All right, wonderful. All right, now your turn.
All right. My question is, no matter what the game system is, when you get the original first book,
Yeah.
and you crack that book open the first time, and you're smelling that fresh ink and feeling those fresh pages,
Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. There's a hell of a lot of work that went into that book.
Exactly.
Game designers make their living doing that
Yep.
shit
Yeah.
for a reason.
Yes.
So, the way my group and I look at it is, okay, before you start changing shit, let's look at how it
Yeah,
works together.
exactly.
And don't just for off the top of my head, encumbrance in D&D.
Yeah.
You know, most people don't keep track of every freaking pound they're carrying. You know, okay, are you carrying a sword? Fine, that works. Are you carrying 5 swords? Hell no. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
But my question is, when it is time to start breaking the rules to save the narrative, as opposed to following the rules to keep within the game boundaries. You know, like my
Yeah.
example, encumbrance. Okay, we can throw that shit out as long as you're not just being stupid.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, if we're not gonna do prepared spells for a wizard, well, we're gonna need to come up with spell points or concentration
Exactly.
points.
Exactly.
Or we're gonna need to find something to replace that.
So they're not
Absolutely.
slinging fireballs left and
But
right.
here's a guy who makes his living building games.
Yeah.
So if this game system is not working for me, we either need to tweak it just a little bit or find a new fucking game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, where do you
do we draw
how do
the
you
line?
draw that line?
I feel like
Repeat the question first.
he's close enough that the mic picks him up.
Okay.
I feel like it depends on the system we're playing, but we like to get, even if we throw out some rules, each system has a very unique flavor. For example, even if we throw out like 90% of Eclipse Phase, assuming we're still using the, at least some of the lore, it would have a very different flavor than Ryutama, which is like a pastoral RPG. It's a Ghibli movie, where Eclipse Phase is Ghost in the Shell in space. And they both have very, very different rules and address some things, like Eclipse Phase addresses what happens when you switch your mind from one body to another. Meanwhile, Ryutama is like, you can pick flowers. And it's like, okay, yeah, these are very, very different games. But for a single game, I think the one that we've stuck with the longest would be Pathfinder or D&D, because they're very, and I don't mean this in a belittling way, they're very like normal, they're vanilla. They don't have any like super out there ideas. It's very basic.
Kind of standard fantasy.
Yeah, standard. And because of that, we've ended up using those as the ones that we end up modifying, because they don't make any grand assumptions like you're going to be transferring your mind from one body to another. You can make house rules to account for that, but for the most part, it provides a nice, simple framework for running a fantasy game with rules, so everybody isn't just, doing whatever they want to do. And I guess answering that, I don't know if it would work for something like Eclipse Phase. Like, we'd probably play a couple games of it and be like, wow, there's a lot that we don't need here. Let's find a different game. So I think if I'm bringing it around, to answer the question, we draw the line whenever the vast majority of the game is something we don't want to use.
Well, yeah.
It's taking up time.
I'd like
or
to
otherwise be
Yeah,
useful
or
for
if
character stuff.
the world and the lore are baked into the rules to such an
Right.
extent that throwing out the rules
Right.
compromises.
I'd like to take a crack at this. This is a really good question because, like, finding that breaking point, I do think does depend on the game a lot. But it's a lot like creating Frankenstein's monster. After a certain point, you've taken life for granted and you've created a monstrosity. Finding that point is always the most difficult part. And the way I start, and probably should have communicated this more clearly at the beginning, start small, work your way up. Like, finding out, like, once again, encumbrance might seem small, but if your game system's based around it, like Ryutama has a lot of elements of encumbrance in it, and you can't throw the system out without the game breaking. If it seems like a small aspect that's just a nuisance to players, try rolling it back first, do it a bit at a time, and see what works for your players, the flow of the session, because if you eventually cross the threshold that the game is no longer the game itself, you absolutely should find a different game. Like, the point that you've made Frankenstein's
What's
monster
that old
is the
thought
point it's time
problem?
to
If you
stop.
replace every part in a car, is it still the same car?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The test sessions. I
Yeah.
think that's excellent. Sessions that don't fit into your canon.
Yeah,
where
campaign, yeah.
people will test their characters out, test the rules out, because you never really know until you do it.
Yeah.
And you feel the flow. And it will drastically change from what you have in your mind. And that makes it a lot easier to figure out what your group needs to help support it as far as rules and just what character you're playing, who you are.
I would say it's something that's very important to keep in mind when you're looking to homebrew a system or to slash and burn rules from something is read the rules thoroughly and try and pay attention to what the developers are trying to do with each and every mechanic. What purpose does it serve? How does it better the game? Something like encumbrance, it's necessary for a lot of systems because you don't want to be carrying around 5 swords. There's no logical basis for that. At the same time, if you don't want it to turn into a game of just keeping track of every tiny iota of poundage. In either direction to the extreme, it just doesn't end up serving the greater story. And
Some players need to be told that you can't have 5 swords.
yes,
Well, also, just an example of how encumbrance could inform play. If you're trying to run a more realistic adventure setting, where it's really important to stress the difficulty of adventuring and how adventurers need to really mind their pack and what they're carrying, encumbrance absolutely plays into that. Because you need to be like, yeah, I need a medkit, I need rope, I need a lamp, and then you're like, oh, I only have like 10 more pounds to carry, I can only carry this teeny sword. Dang. So encumbrance could inform play by leaving it in.
Well, yeah, no, like, game designers are writers too, and they do have they're creating a comprehensive world through the rules.
Yeah.
You can't gut a certain rule that it will leave the world completely hanging,
Right.
or as you put it, you'll need to find a replacement. Like,
Exactly.
some mechanics are vital to individual games. You can't have Call of Cthulhu without sanity rules.
Yes, exactly.
You have to try and get a general idea of what is vital to the system and what has room for change.
Yeah.
And I think trying to put yourself in the shoes of the game's developer, impossible as that is ultimately, is a good way to try and see what they were going for.
Very, very good question.
Another question?
You go, girl.
No.
Here, let's get this one over here. Elfie.
So, kind of stemming from that, to what extent do you think that mechanics and flavors should be maintained in a system before you go, well, I like this, and just making a Frankenstein out of it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're a little far away, so repeat the question.
Okay.
Oh, okay. To what extent should you maintain the rules? How how far do you want to go with Frankensteining it?
I think that's something that you agree upon with the players, because if you change the rules too much, then it'll just end up being something unrecognizable. You all need to figure out, like, all right, yeah, how far do we want to go with this? It's not really something that I think any one person of the group should decide.
It's also something that I think you agree with the core system. Like,
Yeah,
Eclipse
yeah.
Phase is an Eclipse Phase without morphs. Like, that's just
exactly,
that.
yeah.
Like, yeah. It's sort of like, if every player has their own will and their own interests, the rules absolutely do themselves. Like, they want you to play a certain way just as much as every player wants you to play a certain way. The trick is making them all play together nice.
Well, and
Yeah.
also I think striking up a dialogue about what each person wants out of a system.
That can be kind of hard because a lot
can
of
be
people don't, like, they don't know until they do it.
Right.
I know I'm that way. Like I said, I gotta run, blind into things. I gotta play it by the book first.
Sure.
Figure
At
things
the
out.
same time, asking people their general opinions of what they think has worth versus
Yeah.
what doesn't is going to be a great way to get a general idea of
totally.
what the group wants out of something.
Because, like, sometimes you cut something out and it leaves the game with mechanics have weight to them. They have, they justify your actions in a way that isn't pure storytelling. It isn't just a conversation. There's something actually functioning. There are cogs moving.
Right. Well, it
behind the
provides
background.
grounding for the improv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you wind up gutting the game too much, even if it's not a Frankenstein and you have the tone nailed, everything can lose its weight. Like, if actions feel
true.
like they have no impact, is another thing to worry about. That's outside of defying the game creator's original intention. Yeah.
Yeah. Did that
Next.
help? Oh, do you have something?
No, I was just saying next question.
Oh. Yeah. Did that answer the question? Awesome. All right.
Excellent.
Yeah. You over there.
Yeah.
We'll come back
Sorry.
to you.
Nope,
Sorry.
he was on deck already.
Yeah, no.
We'll ask.
I was wondering what your opinion was on trying to do the weirdest thing possible within the scope of the rules and lore.
So like punching the moon, using the feats in D&D.
So the question was, what's our opinion on trying to do the weirdest thing possible that is within the scope of a given system?
Peasant railgun?
Classic example. I think it's hilarious. I personally have never done it, just because I'm not the type to read the rules that in depth. I would like to. What? You looking at me like that? I would love to be in a session where someone just whips that out without any without even foreshadowing it. If I walked into a session and they're like, yeah, we've got all these peasants lined up, I'd be like, why? What? Why?
No, I'm actually I find this to be funny. This is very much the good antagonistic, doing the weirdest thing possible as a player to your GM. If you know them well enough, can very much turn into that fun antagonism, so long as it's not costing the rest of the group.
If your GM isn't expecting it, or they don't like it, though, they can just mess up your day and say it wasn't
shut
work.
you down.
Yeah,
Stab him with the ballista.
Portable hole arrow.
Exactly. There are many examples of using the rules to just mess up the system.
I think it's a great idea, and a lot of the time they can be awesome as thought experiments. I would say trying it in an actual campaign, you should probably ask yourself the question, is this serving the story?
it's with the GM and the other players be okay with
Is
it.
this serving the other players?
Yeah.
You're not trying to beat the GM. You want the GM to come up with something just as great to respond to.
For an anecdote,
Respond with.
for an anecdote, we recently played Tenra Bancho Zero, and one of my players put all of his points, because I offhandedly mentioned in character creation, why not? You can put all your points into one stat. People
What's the
do.
worst that could happen?
Yeah, so he dumped all of his points into body, which is the physical accomplishment stat, and can accomplish really literally anything with
Literally
that
anything
stat.
via strength.
So my job was then, instead of being like, no, you can't do that, I take it back, I'm like, this is going to be fun. I'm going to post them challenges that have nothing to do with strength, and he's
just cooking.
And he's going to have to find ways to put that strength to work in those challenges. And it's really fun to do that. I'd highly recommend it if you and your player have that relationship.
Did that answer?
Sort of, but I was kind of wondering, what if you're, I was talking about, the things like making the sentient blueberry muffin. and being and choosing to actually play as an appliance or something.
Well, do we have a story? We did in the Eclipse Phase game. It's a little bit of a homebrew that we did. One of the characters played a telephone booth. The last existing telephone booth.
It was wonderful.
It was amazing, and the player pulled it off fantastically. So I think if the player has like the role playing or improv abilities to pull it off, let him do it.
Take a look at the player, take a look at the tone, take a look at the story,
and
think, will this ruin everything?
Yeah, and if it all checks out, then why not?
Yeah,
it's
Matt, you had
really,
a good line about this.
Yeah, no, like if you're trying to accomplish something that ultimately is for the sake of a gag or just to introduce some sort of zany flavor into it, I think the question often becomes why not? If it's not head-on conflicting with the general tone of the story or the other players or the GM.
Yeah.
It's not about why, it's about why not. Go ahead and play the sentient blueberry muffin.
But you want to invite the GM's response.
Yeah.
How are they going to deal with this blueberry muffin? Does it allow them some way to either make your life harder or more interesting, or kind of spread the fun to everybody else?
Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. We have about 15 minutes, by the way.
Okay.
Kat.
Okay. You guys keep mentioning like basically Frankenstein's monster and rule systems. Have you ever considered literally doing that? Like, let's take the Hogwarts rules from this system. Let's take the magic from this system.
Let's do that.
You know, I think
we should do that.
I think for life.
Yeah, no, let's just...
Absolutely do it.
Yeah, no, just be all end all. I want to do that now. That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Make
I
a
have
note
a
of
feeling
that.
it'll be a train wreck, but also a great
A really
learning
fun train
A
experience.
wreck.
really fun train wreck.
That would be the most entertaining train wreck ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm making a note of that.
Pokemon.
Obsessed Pokemon.
6 Pokemon.
Perfect. Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please show off.
So my friends and I, we're doing this campaign. It originally started from something from a campaign book, and then pretty much from the second session, everything just kind of slowly, very quickly started going very, very far from what the book had intended, like at all. And then the DM basically he literally broke the world and sent us into an entirely new world. Like starting at level 1 again, I ended up completely redoing my character class.
Oh.
And what are your thoughts on stuff like that? Like just going completely off the rails from a campaign?
That I actually have a question for you. Did you like that change? Like, or was it like one of those agonizing ones like, oh god, I want to start over? Or was it like, oh man, everything's going nuts, this is really exciting?
It was actually really cool. There were a few points where, just specifically with what the DM was doing in the original world, I'm not sure if it was because of the storytelling or just because of how we were interacting, because we were still getting used to each other. Things felt a little slow, but like once everything got into the new world, like everything really picked up again.
Yeah.
Was the
Nice.
new world kind of meant to be more in line with the tone that you guys ended up with?
Not quite. Basically, in the old world, it was a broken world. People didn't have actual proper souls. They just had this essence that slowly deteriorated over time, and sometimes it would just explode before the person was supposed to die, and they'd be replaced by stone golems, whom my ranger character was the only one who could see them. So she was kind of slowly having an existential crisis over this. She didn't think that anyone would believe her, so she said nothing. But
Interesting. I think if everybody enjoyed it, and
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
answers the question,
Yeah.
like, for you. Like, if it seemed like a good change that everyone was in
Right.
favor of, that's the biggest thing.
If it works, then it was good. That almost sounds like a bit of a cop-out. But
and it is!
Yeah. But if it ended up working, then I think that was a good idea.
Yeah,
it worked
absolutely.
out
Test
well for me
sessions
because
almost.
I wanted to multi-class because I was a half-elf and a ranger. I wanted to try multi-classing with druid. But apparently that doesn't work with rangers. So the whole new world thing, the DM, he talks to me, he's like, okay, so I'm giving you this opportunity to become a druid now instead of a ranger. Do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to play around with being a druid and like doing cool stuff and turning into animals and things.
Nice.
You said you were still getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And this was a new sort of setting. So
Yeah.
essentially it's a test. And you wouldn't have known that you wanted to do this sort of stuff until you actually played.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
my first time with Pathfinder too, so.
Nice.
Yeah, tests.
Test
Yeah,
score.
no, yeah, absolutely.
You guys used the term earlier, vanilla baby?
Yeah, he said that and I was rubbing it in because it makes no sense to me.
I love it. So when I was first introduced to gaming, it was in college, and we started off no rules.
Yeah,
And that was a nightmare.
yeah.
It was always like one person, whoever the DM liked the most, or whoever was most charismatic would steal the spotlight, and everyone would just sit around and watch them.
Oh no.
I
Yeah.
was just curious. And it actually turned me off from gaming for a while, and then I came back later.
Yeah.
As vanilla baby. What, have you had any experience with that yourself? And how-
Yes.
Yeah.
Repeat the question. Repeat the
Okay.
question.
Vanilla babies. Have we had experience with really
stealing the
chaos
spot. Yeah.
and people stealing the spotlight, other people getting overshadowed?
We weren't very good when we started.
No.
We did this
That was
all
a
the
problem
time.
that we
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
Not- We can't blame it on other people
Yeah.
entirely.
No, we were the ones that stole the spotlight from each other. It
Constantly
was,
snatching it back and forth.
yeah. It was
Just always interrupting each other.
Yeah, like frequently.
Trying to get our own
Frequently.
points across, even if they're the same as other people's points.
Yeah,
Real vanilla, baby.
real vanilla babies.
No, it's a serious problem that like we ran into when we started in particular, and I think it's like I really do think starting with a system and playing it by the book is very important at the start. Like
Yeah.
we were arrogant early on, I think.
We were very arrogant.
We were very arrogant when we approached gaming early on, in terms of how hack and slash we were with the.
These rules, who needs them?
Yeah,
Not us.
exactly.
We did a lot of making our own systems early
yeah,
on.
Yeah.
Attempts.
Attempts.
Attempts were made.
But like, I could fully understand not only how it could completely turn you off of gaming, because basically sitting there and just listening to one person demonstrate their character at length, and you're like, hey, I've got cool things too.
Well, yeah. Also, losing agency sucks. Losing agency is never fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, to get over that, it was a very conscious effort. We all realized that it was a problem, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. And it basically culminated in improv is about each other. It's about supporting one another in the jokes you're telling. It isn't necessarily about your own jokes.
Very cooperative.
Yeah, it's very cooperative. See how you back me up like that? Yeah. But no, it's very cooperative. So sometimes you might just not gel with a group. Sometimes, or maybe a certain player doesn't gel. You'll have to. You might want to talk to them if you enjoy being around them and enjoy playing with them. Then talk to them outside the game and be like, "Hey, I'd like to continue playing, but I'd also like to talk." Someone phrase this for me better. I'd just make it sound insulting.
You
I
left us
mean,
with a heck of a burden.
Come on,
Yeah.
improv. I just said back me up.
Yeah.
anyway, if you recognize that happening, something you can do is you make the effort to involve someone else in what you're doing, and that will improve pretty much anything from someone just doing something alone, and that'll help get people seeing it's much better if I do something in part with this other person, if I make the effort to support them, create something excellent in the end.
It's
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please.
Oh, no, please, after you.
Okay.
Yes, and
No, building off of what Foss was saying earlier,
Thank you.
it's very much it's very playing a tabletop game or just RPing in general is very much an exercise in improv, not necessarily improvised comedy.
Improvised storytelling.
Improvised storytelling, yeah. But the conventions of improv comedy do actually apply here, whether you're telling a serious story or not. it's about incorporating other people, and the second it's a one-person show, there's no reason to even be doing it as a group. So like, it's unfortunate to say, but when you play completely in an anarchic setting and it's one person and the GM talking, that's their improv session. It's not a group effort, and it can be bad.
Yeah, it's something to talk about outside the group and be like, hey, could we work on incorporating other players more and just talking with them. And this goes back to Piff's question too. It's something to settle outside the table, I personally believe.
To some extent, I think.
To some extent, yeah.
To bring it back to the concept of the vanilla baby, playing with no rules is paradoxically pretty hard because it does really turn into full chaos, more or less right off the bat, if you just go in with everybody trying to accomplish their own thing. And I think playing something entirely by the book, there are often a lot of mechanics which are included solely for the sake of making sure that everybody gets their time in the spotlight. You have the initiative system in a lot of various role-playing games, which ensures that everybody gets their fair chance at a given round of combat. And so I'd say that starting out playing more rules heavy is probably a better way to ensure that the group is more balanced. As you progress and get more comfortable with the dynamics between individual players and people, you can start cutting back on rules and eventually maybe playing with literally no rules as possible. I don't know. We haven't really tried that yet.
Yeah, like a pal of ours actually had a good technique too, to like once again hit home with the improv comparison. At the end of a session, give like shout outs to each cool thing that another player did.
Stuff you liked.
Stuff you liked that they did, and if you find yourself thinking back, it forces you to recollect and think back like, oh man, did I talk over them the entire session? Ooh, maybe I should fix that. It works both ways, both encouraging players you think did good to do better, and like it forces you to reevaluate just in case you're stepping all over someone.
To go back to what Faust was saying about kind of having a conversation outside of the table, I think that there's a lot that can be accomplished there. I think a lot of the time people won't realize that they are showboating or stealing the spotlight. Alternatively, they might know exactly what they're doing. I don't know everybody, but I think there's a lot that can be accomplished with just a nice tactful conversation of, hey, did you notice that you interrupted X several times while they were trying to accomplish Y? That wasn't very great. Maybe you should try and lay off that a little bit. At the same time, if you're ever in a tabletop and you notice that somebody is getting talked over, or they're not getting their moment in the spotlight, something that I like to do is to just try and interact with them in character. Throw them like, hey, what do you think about this X situation that we're in? Or just strike up a conversation about some random aspect of the scene. And, try and work together and pull people back into the story to make sure that they get their moment.
Does that help?
Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Awesome.
We have 5 minutes.
We've got time for like one more question then.
Final question.
You, in the corner next to Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, so I've run several campaigns now, and pretty much all of them have quickly ended up with storylines going way out the window. So I was wondering if you had any experience with that and how you address that.
How you address the story? Incentives. Incentives. I am not as experienced as a GM as you are, but something that I like to do is provide the opportunity to go after the main quest. Kind of like, are you familiar with like Oblivion, like Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Morrowind? Yeah. Ever finish the main quest in that?
No.
Yeah.
Not once.
Me either. What I like to do is I like to provide incentives, reasons for going after the main story. In Oblivion, it's just like, yeah, it's there, but everything else is way cooler. So for the main story, for example, I can't remember what we called it, but there was a campaign where you played a character, and Matt, it was one with Asta and Lyche.
Yes.
Right. I think through going through the main story, your character learned more dark magic, basically.
Yeah, my character's motivation kind of overtook the plot at a certain point, yeah.
I used you as the vector for the plot.
Yeah.
But by going through the main story, they acquired power-ups they wouldn't have otherwise got.
Were you playing Rocky in that one?
They absolutely. Oh yeah, you played Rocky, a man who could manifest a rock as his psychic weapon.
Gregor 1.0. Yeah.
Oh, fun fact! Isn't Rocky's design Gregor's father's design?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, how did I miss that?
Yeah. Anyway, so incentivizing it via power-ups or cool items or narrative, just like interesting narrative
Working
stuff.
in character motivation
Working
stuff.
in character motivations. Say like you have a character who, very simple example. Say you have a character whose family member was killed. You'd be like, hey, I heard that the killer was over here. And if they're in character, they'll be like, ooh. And they'll want to go get him.
Your players are sheep, you just have to find out what breadcrumbs they like.
I'd like to point out that the GM here has said nothing. This is you guys.
Yeah, we've assessed how you
I know that I'm a sheep.
What
Oh my
breadcrumbs
god.
do you like?
I probably only have a minute or two, but to express my own thoughts, this guy drives me off the rails all the time, and he's a better storyteller than me, so that's okay.
I don't know about that.
It's like so you can really trust your players. Like if you believe that you can fully trust their players in the direction they're taking the story, let them do whatever they want.
But realize that you might have to throw all your plans out the window, I guess.
Frequently.
Yeah, I've had to throw my plans out a lot, to be fair.
We're not having this conversation now.
Okay, fine.
You have like
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I think this room is being used after us.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Do we have to quickly
so-
vacate the premises?
We have to sprint out. Everybody
In a calm and orderly fashion.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for coming.
I'm gonna stop the recording now.